We've had one presidential candidate survive an assassination attempt. Our current president's dropping out of the race. We've had protesters burning an American flag and raising a Palestinian flag as the United States' closest ally gave a speech to Congress yesterday. That's how much has happened in several weeks. Guess what hasn't happened in 25 years? An update of how we protect children on their online experience.
Well, today, Louisiana Senator Bill Cassidy voiced his support for a law on the Senate floor. That law in particular is one that he happens to co-sponsor. The passage of the law would, in Cassidy's words, quote, empower parents and empower children. So what is it? It's called COPPA 2.0. It would change how the nation handles data privacy for children. According to Cassidy, the proposed bill would modernize a data privacy law originally passed in 1998 by banning targeted advertising to children and teens. It would also create a set of rules to prevent the excessive collection of a child's data and increase a parent's control over their child's internet access. And according to Senator Cassidy, the proposed changes come as a result of the potential dangers that children face when browsing the internet.
The 1998 rules do not prohibit Instagram, Facebook, and TikTok from collecting personal information on young teenagers without consent, because that was not envisioned 25 years ago. Today, the internet is an integral part of a child's life. The information a child has access to has drastically expanded, exposing children to risk that they may not have the maturity to navigate independently.
Cassidy says by expanding protections against targeted ads and strengthening parental control, children will be given the opportunity to have a safer online experience. COPPA 2.0 is currently awaiting passage in Senate chambers.